Alright guys, so our plan today is to convert this Nissan Sentra 1.8S into a manual transmission from an automatic. So what I'm going to go over today is what parts you need to do that and the process. Okay, so in order to do the manual swap, you're going to need several parts. Most of the parts that I used were sourced from Rock Auto. Some of them were from eBay, and then a small amount of parts and fluids were sourced from 2J Racing, as they specialize in Sentra equipment. So first thing you need is the shift linkage. You're going to need a manual pedal, and then what connects to the manual pedal or the clutch pedal is going to be the master cylinder, hard line, soft line, and then what's actually not pictured but attached to the transmission itself is a slave cylinder. So essentially what happens is, as you push this pedal down, it puts pressure on the fluid in the line, and then that actually pushes the clutch, which separates the transmission from the flywheel and allows you to shift gears. Okay. I was going to reuse this. What I ended up doing was actually buying Exetti master cylinder and slave cylinder, and then what I actually also ended up doing was getting this long NIS Performance clutch line. They actually usually utilize these for VQ swaps, and what it essentially does is it replaces the entire hard line assembly and the soft line, so you get a nice clean look. Also, it makes it easier for maintenance. All right, so the other set of parts you're going to need is the clutch pressure plate. If you can replace the outer seals, you should. A lot of these parts, such as the clutch and slave cylinder, I didn't necessarily have to replace them, but I thought that it was a best practice to do that. So you also need a throwout bearing. These three parts typically will come together, and even sometimes a flywheel. So I have the flywheel bolts, ARP, sourced from 2J Racing, and then what I actually have here are two flywheels. This one on the right is actually the stock flywheel. It's unmachined. But what I went ahead and did was I actually had this one machined. They took about 2 pounds off. The reason why I wanted this done is that the QG is a very low power car, at best 130 horsepower. So I wanted to squeeze a little bit more responsiveness out of the car upon swapping into manual. I should rev a little bit quicker, and if in the future I take it to the track, that might come in handy. What the alternative for this would have been was to order an aluminum flywheel. There's only one, I believe it's Clutch Masters is the manufacturer that makes it. It's actually $400 and it's 8 pounds. So to compare, this one is 15 pounds and this one is 13 pounds. So it gives me a little bit of more performance. The drawback to using a light flywheel on a low power car is you actually end up losing torque, and as many people know, an extremely lightweight flywheel is going to cause you to stall more often given your driving skill, as the revs of the engine drop quicker because there's less rotational weight keeping the momentum. And then finally, of course, you need CV axles. Make sure that they're the correct ones. This one actually looks like it's an ABS axle. We'll have to knock that tone ring off. We have the motor mounts, and that should cover it. So as far as the fluids, I went ahead and did some research. I went ahead with the MT85. I believe for the SCR, they use MT90. If I'm wrong, just correct me. And then I have some Motul brake fluid. The brake fluid is actually going to be used in the clutch line because they're just a hydraulic system. The hydraulic system doesn't know whether or not it's a brake or a clutch. It's really the same physics principles, so you can utilize the same brake fluid. Just got a couple accessories: Tomei shift knob, shift extender, sparkle pedals, and then what I also went ahead and got was some energy suspension bushings. These are gonna go right here. They'll replace this. This actually mounts to the transmission, but it's more stationary. and then this part of the linkage actually pulls on a piece that actually changes the gears in the transmission. I would say the more contained and stiffer this is, the more direct the whole entire shifting feel is going to be. So last but obviously not least is the transmission. And so this is a good point to bring up a couple of things. Cost. I actually was able to source this transmission and some of the other things like the linkage and clutch pedal and things of that nature for $150. Now the original owner of these parts actually wanted to give me the CV axles, flywheel, clutch that was already in the car for the same price, but I went ahead and declined. Reason being is that I wanted to go ahead and replace any conceivable part that can be replaced, so that I don't run into many mechanical issues once the car is put back together. So another thing that you want to recognize about this transmission specifically is that there is another one that actually carries the same serial number. So the serial number for this is, if I'm not mistaken, is the RS5F70A. If you see one that is a 70V, the V stands for viscous LSD. So there's an LSD in there. Those came with the SR20, but you still have 70A transmissions that also bolt on to the SR20 engine. What end up happening is that the bell housing is different. So if you're an SR20 owner and you buy a QG transmission, you'll run into the problem where the bell housing is not going to line up with your engine, and vice versa. If you are a QG owner and you try to line up an SR20 transmission and try to mate it to your QG engine, it will not be compatible. So just make sure that the car that you're sourcing it from is the correct one. So also general cost for the other parts, the clutch kit that actually included the flywheel, I actually kind of jumped the gun and ordered another one, but that cost about $130. CV axles at Rock Auto can be had for about $30 to $60 depending on the parts. So I would say the entire swap, it should run you, if you go the route that I did and put entirely new components everywhere you can, it's probably going to cost you upwards of $600 to $700. Is that worth it? It's totally dependent on you. It's your car, your philosophy. For me, I'm very interested in tuning a car with low power, so that I work on the drivability of the car, the suspension characteristics of the car, and really make it a well-rounded car. Maybe later on swap in a SR20 VE and see how that goes.